So when economists want to understand prices in quantities in markets, they look to supply and demand. And when you use supply and demand together as a tool, we call this tool equilibrium analysis, or supply, demand, and equilibrium analysis. So equilibrium refers to a situation where a market is in balance, when the price in a marketplace balances the plans of both buyers and sellers. In this situation, the equilibrium price is the price where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. And the equilibrium quantity in this market is the quantity that's both bought and sold at the equilibrium price. Now, what happens when plans don't match, when the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are not equal? Well, price acts as the adjustment mechanism. Price adjusts when plans don't match. And so if we look on the graph here, we can see an equilibrium is at point E. And at the price PE, the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal. They're the same. And so equilibrium is a situation when the plans of the buyers and the plans of sellers align. And the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are equal. So equilibrium is a situation when we're in balance. Equilibrium also refers to the fact that there's a tendency towards balance. So when the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are different, when the plans of buyers and the plans of sellers are not equal, that prices will adjust and the market will move from a point of being out of balance to a point of being in balance. So equilibrium also refers to this tendency. And so if we look on a graph, we can see a market equilibrium here at point E at the equilibrium price of $1.50. The quantity supplied equals 40 and the quantity demanded equals 40. So they're the same. So there's a balance here. There's neither a shortage nor a surplus, and this is a market that is in equilibrium. When the price is $2, well, the quantity demanded is 30 and the quantity supplied at this higher price is 50. So there's 20 more supplied than there is demanded. There's a surplus. And this is a market that's out of balance. The quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are not the same. In fact, there's a surplus. There's more supply than there is demand. More quantity supplied than there is quantity demanded. Now, similarly, at a lower price, let's say the price is $1. Well, at $1, the quantity supplied is not that much. It's only 20. The quantity demanded is higher. It's 60. So we have a shortage here. This is a market that's also not in equilibrium. It's not in balance. The quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are different. The quantity demanded is 40 more than the quantity supplied. So this is a market that's not in equilibrium. In fact, it's a market that has a shortage. Now, what happens when we have a surplus or shortage? Well, price acts as the adjustment mechanism. So at any price above the equilibrium price, the tendency towards equilibrium will force the price down, and the price will decline until we get to the point where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are the same. When you have a shortage at any price below the equilibrium price, well, the opposite is going to happen. You're going to have the forces pushing the prices up, and the price will keep going up until it reaches the equilibrium price, and we can get back into balance. And when we're at equilibrium, the buyer's plans and the seller's plans agree, and price doesn't change, and it's not going to change. We're going to stay in balance until some event happens that changes either the demand or the supply or both. Now, I will also mention here that there's a couple things to notice. Number one, when there is a shortage, let's say that there's only 20 units supplied, well, the price is going to be up here at $2.40. That's where on the demand curve you can sell the 20 units that do exist. And so we say that the market solves the problem of a shortage in a socially beneficial way because it allocates the resources that do exist, the 20 units, to the people who value them the most, the ones that are evidenced by their willingness to pay more in order to get the product. The other thing is that over time, the quantity supplied will increase bringing the price down a little bit, enabling it to eventually get back to the point where the price is lower. It's $1.50, and the quantity supplied and quantity demanded are equal. And we'll get back to that equilibrium point, but that happens over a period of time. So let's look at all the different situations of how this can play out. Let's use equilibrium and supply and demand analysis as a tool. So we start out in equilibrium where we're at point E. At the equilibrium price, the quantity supplied and quantity demanded are the same, and we're going to basically stay in this situation, stay in this balance, unless something happens that changes the demand or supply. Here's an example. We have an increase in demand. What might cause an increase in demand? Well, one of the 6 things that changes demand. Maybe the population in an area has increased. When population increases, the demand increases. The curve shifts from D1 to D2. And you can see we'll move from an equilibrium point of E1 to E2. The new demand curve, D2, intersects the existing supply curve, S1, at this point, E2. E2 represents a higher price and a greater quantity. So after the market has a chance to adjust, we'll have a higher price, a greater quantity supplied, and a greater quantity demanded. The price will go to $2, and the quantity both supplied and demanded will go to 52, and that'll be the new equilibrium point. So if you notice, after the demand curve shifts from D1 to D2, we have a shortage. So the quantity demanded actually on the new curve at the old price of $1.50 is up close to 70. And of course, the price, there's not 70 being supplied. So the price has to rise to have more supply. As the price rises, more supply increases. As the price rises, some of the demand also goes away until we reach this new equilibrium point, E2, where the price is $2 and the quantity supplied and the quantity demanded are equal, and equal to 52. Now the opposite happens in a situation where we have a decrease in demand. The curve moves from D1 to D2. Initially we have a surplus using the old price and the new demand curve. The demand is only 10, supply is 40. The price will have to drop, and it'll keep dropping until we reach this new equilibrium point, which represents a lower price, $1, and a lower quantity, both supplied and demanded. The quantity supplied and the quantity demanded decreases to 25. So when we have a decrease in demand, we have a pressure to have a lower price and a decrease in the quantity. Now, we can also look at a situation where we have an increase in supply. The curve, let's say the supply increases from S1 to S2. S2 represents an increase in supply. Maybe instead of there being a decrease in the population, we have an increase in the population. And therefore, supply will increase. Well, with the new supply curve at the old price, you're going to have a supply of 70. But the demand is only going to be 40. So you have a surplus. What has to happen? Well, price acts as the adjustment mechanism. Price will force, the price will go down. In the process of the price going down, the quantity demanded, the quantity demanded will increase, and we'll move to the new equilibrium point, E2, which has a lower price, $1, and a higher quantity supplied and quantity demanded. In this case, it comes in about 58. So when there's an increase in supply, the curve shifts to the right, the price declines, and the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied increases. The opposite thing will happen when we have a decrease in supply. The supply curve shifts leftward to S2. S2 involves a new equilibrium point with a higher price, $2, and a lower quantity. This is a quantity supplied and quantity demanded equal to 25. So the price rises, the quantity decreases. We have a new equilibrium point of E2 where the new supply curve intersects the existing demand curve. Now, it can also be a situation where both supply and demand change. There's no reason why only one has to happen at a time. So in this example, we'll look at a situation where there's an increase in both demand and an increase in supply. So the original equilibrium was E1, where S1 intersected D1. And now there's an increase in supply that causes the price to go down, and it causes the quantity to increase. And then there's also an increase in demand. So we can analyze that piece separately. An increase in demand causes the price to rise and the quantity to increase. So you can see that when we have an increase in both demand and supply, both of those factors cause the quantity to increase. So we know the quantity increases here. It goes from 40 to 70. But one of those factors causes the price to go down, and one of the factors causes the price to go up. So we don't really know beforehand what will happen to price. We can't really determine it. Depends on which one is stronger. If the tendency of supply to decrease prices is stronger than the tendency of demand to increase prices. And so we just don't know. Now, after this happens, how would we know? You go out into the real world and you can see. But from a predictive standpoint, we don't know beforehand. We do know beforehand that if we have both an increase in demand and an increase in supply, that the quantity will increase because both of those factors will increase the quantity. We just don't know what will happen with price because one of them increases the price, one of them decreases the price, and we don't know which one is stronger. We can look at a situation where both demand and supply decrease. It's kind of a similar situation. It's just the opposite. If we're going to go from E1 to this point here, which represents a higher price and a lower quantity, and then we take into account the fact that the demand curve demand has decreased and demand curve shifts to the left, well, that's going to decrease the quantity but lower the price. So again, we know the quantity goes down because both of those factors decrease the quantity. We don't know what happens with the price because one of them increases the price and one of them decreases the price. So beforehand, we can't really predict what will happen to the price. We don't know which one of those factors is going to be stronger. The only way we can know this is by going in the market and looking at what happens after it happens, and then that will tell us which one happened to be stronger. So you can have a situation where we have a decrease in demand and an increase in supply. Well, when we have a decrease in demand, that lowers the price and lowers the quantity. When we have an increase in supply, that again lowers the price but increases the quantity. So now we know the price will go down because both of those changes are ones that reduce the price, but we don't know what will happen to the equilibrium quantity because one of them involves increasing the quantity and one of them involves decreasing the quantity. So we know the price will fall. We just don't know beforehand what will happen to the quantity. We can look at an increase in demand and a decrease in supply. Well, that's a kind of a similar situation, but just the opposite. We know that both an increase in demand and a decrease in supply will both increase the price. So the price will definitely go up. We don't know what will happen with the equilibrium quantity because when we get to E2, one of the factors that got us there lowered the quantity. One of the factors that got us there raised the quantity, but we don't know which one is stronger. So it's indeterminate what the quantity is. We just know that the price will increase because both those factors have a tendency to increase the price. Now, you don't have to really memorize what happens to price and quantity when there's a change in demand or a change in supply, or a change in both, or a decrease in one or an increase in the other. And the reason you don't is because we can just draw out the supply and demand curves. If we know that demand is increasing, we can move the demand or supply curve to the proper price, and then just look at what happens to price and quantity. So the beauty of this tool is you don't have to memorize what happens. You can just use the tool and draw it out, either using a computer or a piece of paper or a napkin or whatever, and draw out what happens to this supply and demand curves, and it will tell you what happens to the price and quantity. So that's the beauty of this tool, is that it's an important tool in economics to understand, and it can help us understand what happens to price and quantity when there's changes to price and quantity in a marketplace. So this is the equilibrium concept and the supply demand and equilibrium analysis tool. And the important thing to remember is that price is the adjustment mechanism. When there's a surplus or a shortage, when we're not in equilibrium, when we're not in balance, price is the thing that will change. Price is when the price either decreasing, increasing, will enable the market that's not in balance to move more into balance and eventually into equilibrium and into balance, where it will stay until something else happens with supply and demand.